I'm Jack Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. The God's with the king about it. You're just the same. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
Six.
Six, I think.
Thank you so much, Marcia. And as usual, we have a very special guest on this program. So special that Sports Illustrated wants to reference him as the Roger Federer of tennis media. He is the managing.
I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. The God's with the king about it. You're just the same. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes?
4, 3.
We're back in our usual spot here on This Is Just In after our very first live on location show, which was held at Bubba's Sports Bar here in Barbados in association with our partners, RMJ Agencies and Appleton Estate Rum. And in some good news, we'll be heading back out on the road soon, so you can listen out for all of those details. Follow us on all of our social media channels. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, we are there. Good night. I am Marsha Boyce. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of This Just In. Now, tonight we have another special episode for you. We're talking all things tennis and so much more. But first, tennis. The US Open has returned. The Grand Slam is underway. And who better to talk about tennis than a man who's seen by many as the go-to guy in the tennis world as it relates to statistics, history, and so much more. And of course, one of our hosts, Justin Marvel, he is a tennis man himself. So Justin, you're in the hot seat along with sports media consultant, Randy Walker.
Thank you so much, Marcia. And as usual, we have a very special guest on this program. So special that Sports Illustrated wants to reference him as the Roger Federer of tennis media. He is the managing partner of New Chapter Media, tournament director of the Marty Fish Foundation Tennis Tournament, and also a best-selling author of many books, including Today in Tennis History. Welcome no other than my good friend, Randy Walker. How are you doing?
Justin, I'm doing great. Great to connect with you. I was reminded on Facebook this week with the memories that it was 4 years ago this week when you and I met in at the Open, watching Barbados' own Darian King playing in the U.S. Open qualifying. And it was great to meet you after emailing a bunch during the Olympics. So I'm glad that we kept the friendship up and we're talking here today.
So unfortunate you mentioned that because neither of us can be at the U.S. Open right now. I also often tell my friends that I refer to it as the Disney World of sporting events. So like, it's a bummer for me because I've been to like 4 straight U.S. Opens before this year. So I know I've only been to 4. So how is it for you personally not to be at this year's U.S. Open?
Well, it seems a little weird. I mean, I've been to every U.S. Open as a fan or working since 1979.
Wow.
So I went to the U.S. Open as a 10-year-old in 1979, and I've been, every year since, as a fan up until 1992, and then 1992 was the first year when I was working for the USTA all the way through 2005. And then since 2005, I've had various other responsibilities working for TV, for the Tennis Channel, CBS, and also covering the tournament for WorldTennisMagazine.com and so forth. So it's a little strange not being there, and certainly it's bad not to have the streak continue, but very, very happy that the USTA was able to pull it off and to have the event and to give people entertainment on television, at least to be able to watch the tournament on television, and also to give these players an opportunity to compete. And certainly for a lot of those players, they need a paycheck. So being able to give those players a paycheck is really important. So I'll be glued to the television for 2 weeks and watch pretty much as much as I can remotely here from Vero Beach, Florida, where I am right now.
So yes, I'm glad that you mentioned that you're in Florida right now. Considering the numbers of cases that you've had over the months, and also at one point the cases had skyrocketed in New York, was there ever a point that you were concerned that a USTA would not be able to pull off?
I kind of always felt like they were going to pull it off. I know that, I worked for the USTA, for 13 or so years, and, they're a very innovative organization. And, certainly there was the case where, when the pandemic, started to come to fruition in the United States and in March, everybody always kind of thought, oh, this is only going to be just for a little while. It's just going to be 4 weeks. It's going to be 6 weeks. It's going to be 8 weeks, etc. And then when it became a little more serious, the USTA was, starting to put it out there that, we're going to try to hold the tournament. We're going to make the decision by early, late May or early June, etc., whatever the deadline was. And I always felt like things were going to improve and that they were going to pull it off. And I actually had even said privately to people, I thought that the U.S. Open not only was going to happen, but that there were going to be fans allowed, or at least a limited amount of fans. And, certainly that didn't pan out, or they haven't announced that yet. But, you're seeing in other sports, you're seeing in football and basketball, or mainly football, that a lot of these college teams and NFL teams are saying, hey, we're going to be able to have fans in the stadium, but they're only going to be at 20% capacity, et cetera. And there have been some events that have gone on in the United States where they have been fans in attendance, but it's only been 20% capacity. For instance, World Team Tennis at the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. That was a very there wasn't a lot of COVID cases in West Virginia, so they were able to have a limited amount of fans there. And the infection rate right now in New York City is basically 0.5%. So there's really not a lot of transmission of the disease in New York right now. So that's kind of that threat has dissipated tremendously. But obviously, we don't know a lot about the disease. We don't know if it can spike up and so forth. But the USTA has done an amazing job in keeping everybody in, a bubble there. And so far, so good, as far as, no cases, no trouble so far. So fingers crossed.
Well, I know you're not there, Randy, as I'm not there either, unfortunately. But given the bubble-like restrictions that the USTA is putting on these players and the fact that there are no fans, what do you think the impact will be on, for the actual on-court play for these players?
Well, I think that a lot of people are discussing how the players are going to react to the atmosphere or the lack of atmosphere, and that some players who really thrive on the, U.S. Open chaos, being in front of 5,000 fans, screaming and drinking and heckling, and, the U.S. Open, atmosphere, where some people really thrive in that environment. Certainly the more advanced, higher ranked players that are used to that kind of, and the loudness and the, just the circus that is the U.S. Open in New York. And if you're an inexperienced player and you get thrown into that, boy, you're shell shocked. You're already down, 50 love every game because of that atmosphere. So I think it's going to be more of an equalizer, that you are going to see more upsets. You are going to see more players that are, they're playing against a top-ranked player, and it's just basically on a backyard court, atmosphere. So I think you'll see a little bit more, upsets and a little bit more equalizer. Certainly a player like Novak Djokovic, who's, pretty much head and shoulders above most field, I think he could pretty much, handle any atmosphere. And I think he actually might actually prefer a more quiet atmosphere. So that's something that's going to be interesting to look at. I think somebody like Serena Williams, she thrives on that, and she gets pumped up by the crowd and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to see like how she can kind of pump herself up, and if she's down, she's not going to have 20,000 people roaring for her to get back into a match and so forth. So I think it's going to be fascinating view. So I can't wait. I'm not going to be there. In a lot of ways, I'm actually a lot more intrigued this year by the U.S. Open based on the unusual atmosphere.
So you actually brought me directly to my next question. Let's go straight into Novak. Obviously, he is the clear favorite to win yet another Grand Slam. But in your mind, will there be an asterisk on this one, considering obviously there will be no Rafa and there's no Roger?
No asterisks. No asterisks. So you look at, I actually wrote a column on this on my website, worldtennismagazine.com, and I did a little podcast about it too, that there's no asterisks at the U.S. Open this year because through the history of tennis, there's been many other major tournaments, Grand Slam tournaments, that have had similar draw strengths and so forth. You look at like the French Open in the 70s and the Australian Open in the 70s and the 80s, where the fields were not that strong. You look at somebody like Guillermo Vilas. Guillermo Vilas won, he's one of the all-time great players, Hall of Famer. Probably his second biggest title that he won in his career was the 1977 French Open. But that tournament didn't have Bjorn Borg, didn't have Jimmy Connors, didn't have Vitas Gerulaitis, didn't have Manuel Orantes, all who were in the top 6 in the world. If you don't have Jimmy Connors, number 1 player in the world, and Bjorn Borg, other than Rafael Nadal, the greatest clay court player of all time, who only lost 2 matches ever at the French Open. If you don't have those 2 guys in the French Open draw, do you put an asterisk by that? etc. For many years at the Australian Open in the mid 70s into the mid 80s, there was only an average of 1 top 20 player in the Australian Open field. So there was no asterisks, with that. During World War II, the U.S. Open or U.S. Championships at the time was played. It was primarily American players, no asterisks there. Talk about no fans. The 1969 Open was played in Brisbane, Australia, and they could barely draw flies. Rod Laver won that. And those flies in Australia, but
massive even.
But Rod Laver won that Australian Open in 1969. That was the first leg of his Grand Slam, and for the final, they barely had 1,000 people there. So you look at by the time this U.S. Open is all said and done, you may have 1,000 or 2,000 healthcare workers, staff, etc. In the stands at Arthur Ashe Stadium. It's 23,000 seat stadium. You can pretty much do a lot of social distancing there and so forth. So no asterisks at the U.S. Open. It's unfortunate that some of the players pulled out, but they're every right to do that. It's everybody's personal decision, and but absolutely no asterisks. So if you want more information on that, read that on my column. No asterisks.
Please read Randy's column. I have to get around to it, I must admit. So I hope during this time that he actually gives me a link or a plug as to how to find his column so I can read it personally. We like to put people on our guests on the spot on this show, so we won't let you get away. As you said, it's no asterisk. So do you see Novak, as he said, he's clear head and shoulders above the rest of the field? Do you see Novak winning again? Or do you see a situation where Dominic Thiem or Stefano Tsitsipas or maybe even Alexander Zverev use these conditions with no crowd, as you mentioned, to finally break through and win their first?
Well, I think so far, I think one of the things that's interesting this year about the U.S. Open is there's also a new court surface. It's Lakoid. I don't know how to specifically pronounce it, but for years it was Deco Turfu, and now they have a new court surface. So I think that's also going to change things up a little bit. I mean, Novak is certainly a player to beat. He's, head and shoulders the number one player in the world, best player out there, best player in the field right now. But with the fast courts, you just don't know how that's going to happen. So, Novak's definitely the favorite, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else, one of those new up-and-comings, those next-gen guys, maybe gets him. Or maybe a big server like John Isner, whose serve would really benefit from those faster courts. Maybe he, goes deep. But that's what's going to make it so exciting, is that it's so unpredictable, this year. And even more so, I think, on the women's.
You're just predicting my questions, because that's the very next one. Not only do I want you to call it a women's winner, but as a follow-up question to that, we have discussed on the show, I think, a couple of times, especially with your friend now, Carl Hill, how disappointed we are in the lack of consistency among the top players. The two Pliskova sisters, Americans, Madison Keys and Sloane Stevens, Simona Halep, Petra Kvitova, I'm sure I'm missing out on plenty others. They have not been able, Naomi Osaka, they would win a Grand Slam here, and then you'd see them get beaten in the first round by opponents who have not even called just now. Does the lack of consistency in women's tennis post-Williams era concern you? And then also give me your winner in the women's field.
Wow. Well, Brad Gilbert said on ESPN that he could see as many as 30, any one of 30 women in the draw win the tournament. And that's about right. I mean, it can be anybody can win the tournament. Karolina Pliskova, she plays very well on fast courts. She's the number one seed. She's never won a major. I think with the fast court, she's going to be, Serena. She's going for Grand Slam singles title number 24 to tie Margaret Court. She's going to be tough to beat. There's really anybody that can win. I think it's exciting, though, that there's so many different players that have been able to win on the Grand Slam stage in women's tennis. And I personally like that. I love looking at a draw and seeing unpredictable and who's going to get to the semis, who's going to get to the finals, who's going to win. And, it's more exciting to me to see a player try to break through and win their first major, as opposed to, seeing who's going to win number 18 or number 19 between, Rafa and Novak, and, seeing them play for the 48th time. I mean, I'd rather see, I don't want to see the rich get richer. I want to see, someone become rich for the first time. That's more, exciting to me. So, I've been a lot more intrigued by the women's game in the last few years, just because of the unpredictability. So, gosh, I mean, I'm going to respectfully pen picking a women's winner because, it really could be anybody. And there are 32 seats now in the women's field. I wouldn't be surprised if it was an unseeded player. Even on the men's side, there could be an unseeded player win it. So I can't wait to watch.
Speaking of unseeded players, does the fact that the tournament doesn't have a qualifying draw, does that really impact either field as much, or does it really, considering that these players are going to be unseeded, does it really, have no sway over the end, the outcome at all?
Yeah, no, I feel so bad that those players are not getting a chance, because all they want is a chance to compete. They want to get out there. Every player has dreams, and they have dreams when they want to become professional tennis players to play the big stage. When you and I saw that with Darian King, we saw him, his dream was to play the Olympics, and he got to play the Olympics on the big stage. And then he qualified for the U.S. Open, and he plays Zverev on Arthur Ashe Stadium court. I mean, he's going to be telling that story for, the rest of his life, that he had that chance. And that was his U.S. Open final. So for those players to not have that chance is crushing, and to not have that chance to fulfill their dreams, that's awful. But when it, comes down to the tournament is staged to determine the champion of the United States Championships for the year. And when you look back through the history of the tournament, there have only been 4 players in the men and the women who have emerged through the qualifying rounds that have even gone as far as the quarterfinals. So, there's, a very, practically a zero chance that a player that would be in the qualifying would win the tournament. So it doesn't really have an effect on who's going to win the tournament, but it's just a shame that those players, don't get a chance to have their chance at glory. But this is extraordinary circumstances. The USTA had to make some very difficult decisions, and life isn't always fair, and in this case, it's not really fair for those guys. And hopefully, they'll get a chance to, have an opportunity to play in the qualifying rounds of major tournaments for years to come, and to have their shot at.
Going on, just straying a bit away from the U.S. Open and making it more overarching. Eventually, at some point, and we don't know when, but eventually, the big three have to, bow down and step away from tennis. Where do you see the state of men's tennis afterwards? Do you think it's going to take a step down because of the glory years of these three men have kind of propelled the sport along so much? Do you think the sport, takes a step back? Or do you see a situation where Thiem or Zverev or Tsitsipas continue the lofty standards of men's tennis as it is right now?
Well, everybody's been I'm not sure if they've been waiting for it or anticipating it. I think they've been kind of, dreading the time, when Novak and Rafa and Roger are no longer going to be on the stage, what's men's tennis going to look like? Well, we're going to get a preview of that right now, because there's no Rafa in the field. He chose not to play, and Roger is injured and he's not playing. So Novak is the only one of the big three who's playing. So we're going to get a preview of what men's tennis is going to look like in the years to come right here at the 2020 U.S. Open. But it's all cyclical. I mean, this has been a generational conversation, every decade or so, is what's it going to be like after, Rod Laver and Ken Rosewall retire, or after Stan Smith and Ilie Nastase retire. My first year when I was working full-time for the USTA was 1993 U.S. Open, and it was the first time that there was no John McEnroe or Jimmy Connors in the U.S. Open. And everybody was thinking like, men's tennis is terrible. What's the next generation going to be like? This is going to be boring. We got this guy, Pete Sampras, who's not a real outgoing guy, and Michael Chang and Jim Courier and these Andre Agassi, and these guys don't really seem that exciting, etc. And then look what happened. It ended up being one of the great generations of American tennis, and certainly of tennis of all time. And Pete Sampras, went on to become, in his time, the greatest player, the greatest men's tennis player of all time. And then, the big three came on. So, I think that there'll probably be a little bit of a bump in the road, before that transition is fully accepted. But I fully see that, the Tsitsipas's, the Medvedevs, the Dominic teams and so forth, that they'll be, embraced, and they'll get more attention, and their personalities will shine, and they'll win multiple majors, and, tennis will continue to, keep on going.
In light of the fact that we're looking at the big three while they're still playing, I'm going to keep you on that hot seat, Randy. I want you to tell us, in your estimation, who is the greatest of all time?
Well, I think it's not not all the data has been put forth. The players are still active. I think if you were going to say right now, you'd have to say Roger Federer. He's won, the most majors. He's won, he's won the most majors. Rafael Nadal, most of his majors have been on clay. Certainly he's won Wimbledon. He's won the Australian Open. He's won the U.S. Open. But, he has double-digit, French Open championships. So he's certainly the greatest clay court player of all time. Rod Laver won 2 Grand Slams. One of them was in the amateur era. The other one was in the pro era, where everybody played. It's hard to argue with that. So there's a lot of data. You could argue any one of those guys, and you could throw Pete Sampras, in there. Well, and Pete certainly, played. You can read the case for Pete Sampras in the book that I just published, Pete Sampras, Greatness Revisited by Steve Flink, where he, reviews Pete's, career, and, puts forth, how great of a player he was, because everybody's certainly, forgotten him. But, you could say most accomplished player. You could say greatest player. It's tough to compare the eras, but certainly Rod Laver, Pete Sampras, and then the big three: Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, and Roger Federer. On the women's side, certainly got to say Serena Williams, 23 majors, one shy of Margaret Court's 24 majors. A lot of Margaret Court's majors were won with significantly smaller draws, with like 32, 56, 48, 64 draws. A lot of the Australian Open she won were only Australian players, with not that many, top international players playing them, etc. Margaret Court also won so many doubles majors and mixed doubles majors as well. I mean, she has the record for the all-time, majors wins. Martina Navratilova, she won 18 majors. So did Chris Evert. Martina won a ton of doubles majors, mixed doubles majors. She won the U.S. Open mixed doubles title at age 49.
Wow.
So I actually got asked by the Tennis Channel to vote in a poll that they were doing about, as far as the greatest of all time, men and women combined. Doesn't matter what gender, who's the greatest of all time. And I voted for Martina because she won. She had the longest career. She won 18 majors in singles. She won US Open mixed doubles at 49, and I voted for her as the greatest of all time. Both not distinguishing between the genders, and then also Steffi Graf. I mean, she won the Grand Slam, and she won the Grand Slam with a gold medal. Margaret Court also won a Grand Slam. Maureen Connolly won a Grand Slam in the 50s. But I think for the women, you'd have to say Graf, Court, Serena, Martina, Chrissy.
Okay,
those would be the greatest of all time.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna date myself right now and tell you that my favorite players are Steffi Graf and Pete Sampras. So I can guess you can tell how old I am just by those answers alone.
You're a 90s guy.
So I am indeed a 90s guy. I won't lie to you. So it's kind of like on this show, we don't shy away from the issues. And as we've seen now, the unrest has touched tennis. And you've had iconic moments with Althea Gibson and also Arthur Ashe. What sort of, and I mean, obviously this is right now tape recorded, so we don't know what's going to happen by Monday, by the time that this airs. But what sort of impact do you see the current social unrest in the U.S. having potentially on the U.S. Open draw?
Well, I don't think it's going to have an effect on the competition per se. The USTA is allowing players for this year only. Like you have like patches and hats and so forth, that they're allowing players to have social justice messaging, which is a really great thing for the USTA to allow the players to do, because every player wants to voice an opinion about what's going on, in the world and in the United States and so forth. So that's a really great thing for the USTA to do. The tennis world, I think, has always been, I shouldn't say always been, but recently has been really ahead of social issues of the world. And I think that has to do with the fact that tennis is so international. And when you are involved in professional tennis, whether you're a player or a coach or media or agent or representative, that you're traveling the world and you're meeting people from all around the world, from different cultures and different backgrounds and different ethnicities. And there's really an understanding of, the issues, and what people's backgrounds are, and, what sexual orientation they have and so forth. So I think tennis has really been, of late, in the last, years, decades, et cetera, has really been at the forefront of social issues. We have great, social justice, warriors in tennis, starting with Arthur Ashe and, what he did for social justice issues, in South Africa, and helping Haitian refugees in the 1980s, and Martina Navratilova speaking of sexual rights and so forth. So tennis has really been to the forefront of this, and people have their voices and they have their platforms, and it's been really great to see young players like Naomi Osaka and Coco Gauff really take the torch and really be responsible about their platforms and making sure that their messages are getting out there for social justice and for the world to be a better place. And they have platforms and they're using those platforms, and that's a good thing. I mean, they're influential people and they're influencing the next generation. So I tip my hat to all the people in tennis around the world that are trying to make this a better world.
Well, thank you so much, Randy. We've kept you on much longer than we actually told you, and you have been extremely informative, especially as we look forward to the start of the U.S. Open. Unfortunately, neither of us can be there. But I hope in this post-COVID world that we will be able to link up for next year's Miami Open. Write it down,
yes,
Randy. Next year's Miami Open. Hopefully, you and I can get to watch some fantastic tennis. So I want to thank you again from us for appearing on the show. I hope you also have a copy of that Pete Sampras book just for this show. Neil may not read it, or Marshall, but he definitely will delve through every single page. And we also hope to have you back on the show as the U.S. Open progresses to the latter round, to the second week. So thank you once again, Randy.
Well, thank you, Justin. And, it's been great to reconnect with you. And I know we're connected on Facebook, and I love seeing all of your, interactions and so forth. And, give my best to the people of Barbados. What an amazing country. And I hope to visit there one day, and hope we can sit courtside somewhere to watch Darian King battle it out on some courts around the world. But all the best to you, all the best to Barbados, and things will be getting better, and we'll all be in better times soon down the road.
Okay, thank you so much, Randy. So as Randy goes, don't you disappear, viewers. We have a second half of the show coming, including social justice and the battle against racism in other sports, namely the NBA and NFL. So just hold on, and we'll be back shortly.
I don't have a mark on my face, and my upset's not in this one, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with me, ain't no matter, you're just the same. I still got the world. I still got the world. I still got the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes?
I don't have a mark on my face.
3, 2.
Welcome back to This Just In right here on our YouTube channel. A good interview there between Randy Walker and Justin Marvel. Now, guys, we're moving into the second half of our show. So, of course, it's time to bring the gang all together. Justin and Neil, good night. How are you doing?
Good night, everybody. Hope everybody as well.
I am fine now. Awesome interview that Randy was. It was, grateful having him on the show. So hopefully, as we go deeper in the tournament, that we can get him back.
Yep.
Definitely so. Now, something else that has been dominating the news once again is the social unrest that's playing out in the United States and the impact it had on sport over the last couple of days or so. So 5 days ago, it all started with the Milwaukee Bucks and them boycotting their NBA playoff game in protest of the shooting of another black man in police custody, by police in the US, this time Jacob Blake. And it happened in their home state of Wisconsin. Now that move quickly spread across the NBA, with all playoff games for that day and the following day being postponed. Of course, not surprisingly, the WNBA followed suit because the ladies have been really at the forefront of protest action. And the movement swept across US professional sport. with forms of protest being seen in the NFL, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, and even tennis. Now, play has since resumed across the various leagues, but the discussions continue, and we will continue that discussion right here. So, Neil, I'm going to start with you. Are you surprised by the action that took place following that shooting incident involving Jacob Blake?
Marsha, of course not. Good night, everybody. Of course not. I'm not surprised by the action was taken, because enough is enough, right? I mean, at the end of the day, still these players, mostly African American, they've been dealing with this for God knows how long, right? I mean, at the end of the day, still, you know, yeah. I mean, I don't even know where to start in terms of what's the catalyst for all of this, right? I mean, we could go back as far as Emmett Till. Right, that anniversary for his death and what took place back then was recently, right? So I mean, we had Juneteenth. I mean, there's so many things throughout history. I don't even know what's the catalyst, but let's start from this year. I mean, we had Ahmaud Arbery, we had Breonna Taylor, right?
George
we had
Floyd.
George Floyd, and now we had Jacob Blake. And honestly speaking, there are others too, but I thought that the George Floyd one was you couldn't get around it, you couldn't defend it. It was that was the call to show America and the rest of the world that there's something going on and a miss within the disparity and the privilege and just the whole system of how it is geared toward African American people and people of color. But then what happened to Jacob Blake, and then what happened to the young man? I can't remember his name. It's probably a good thing, but the 70-year-old white guy that shot 3 people, killing 2, right? To see how Jacob Blake was treated. I know people said he had warrants and he had a weapon, a knife of some sort, but at the end of the day, still, because he had warrants and because he had a knife, even if he resisted arrest, he did not deserve to be shot 7 times in his back. As it was explained by his father, you shoot a man once to disable him, you may shoot him twice just in case the first one was a miss. But after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the intent is to murder, right? So to see how he was treated in that instant, and to see how the young man a few days later was treated during the protest, where he left Chicago to come down to Kenosha during the riots, the protests, so that he can protect businesses, right? With a assault rifle. 70 years old, and yes, he was attacked by protesters, and he shot them, killing 2 of them. But that was not, to me, that's not even the whole thing about it for me. The thing about it for me is that he approached police. There were police jeeps, vehicles. There were several police vehicles in the area passing him, driving past him. He was walking toward a police car and towards some police jeeps, and he had his hands up with a assault rifle draped around him. People are telling the police that someone was shot. This man is approaching you, and they don't take him on. They drive past him. The police don't draw their weapons on him. They just treat him as just an average citizen with the right to bear arms. And he goes home to his bed. He gets to sleep. He gets to relax. He gets to eat, take a shower, and then is arrested the next day in comfort. Now, to me, that is it. That is the number one proof why there is a problem in America, and I can understand that, because to me, as a Black person in the Caribbean, in Barbados, where we have our own issues with race and our own history with race and our own issue with colorism and with classism, it struck me, because as an African American, and you're paid million, yes, you're paid very well to play, but at the end of the day, still, you are entertainment. You're the monkey dancing to a tune, right? You are good enough for your kids to watch at a certain time and to emulate on the basketball court, but outside of that, shut up and dribble, right? So to me, it's not surprising that these players do it, man, because it just shows where the system is and how it was never intended for Black people. It never was intended to represent Black people in any way. So I have no problem with what the players did. To be honest, I was a bit more extreme last week, where I was saying that they shouldn't play at all. But certain things went down in certain meetings. They had several meetings, and they decided to do things like open arenas for polling stations, encouraging people to vote. Players on a private matter are going to volunteer their time during the voting process, and also going to have initiatives where people can can make it easier to register to vote, so that they're and this is people of color. So this is to make people make it process easier for them to vote. Right? They're doing other things too behind the scenes. I'm sure Justin will talk about some of it. But yeah, I have no problems with the players doing it. Honestly, last week I was saying, if you're a black athlete or an entertainer in the United States, just pull up sticks and, you know, don't do anything. But, you know, I understand there's a lot of money invested, and yes, it is platforms. You can use these things as platforms to get your voice out there. So it is really a scary time. This year has been a very trying year, but what's happening in the United States is a very scary time for anyone of color. There's not only Americans, because I have family that, you know, lives overseas. I have a family member that's going to go overseas next month, and, you know, he's a black man, and it's just a scary time right now.
Now, when LeBron James was asked about, you know, if there was ever a point following that initial boycott that the league might not have continued, he adamantly said, yes, there was a point where we almost didn't continue. However, they were now comfortable with the plan of action that they put together. And that is why, you know, things resumed. So Justin, my question to you is, bearing this in mind, you know, the players felt strongly about this. They boycotted certain games, or forcing the games to be postponed. They came together, they developed what they thought was, let's say, an impactful plan of action. Do you think these latest rounds of protests will then actually be effective? You know, what will be the real impact of this latest?
No, Marsha. And let me preface that by saying I am in no way criticizing the efforts that the NBA players, the NBA Players Association, and the actual NBA League office did. So let me start by saying I applaud the players themselves, starting with the Milwaukee Bucks. George Hill was at the front of this, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and we know Sterling Brown actually had his own personal situation that he referenced on social media. I want to say that I am so proud, because the step was very courageous. The mere fact, because as we know, they are in, you know, direct contravention of their CBA, collective bargaining agreement, by doing this, and you're risking your salary. I don't know if, you know, the owners will ever come back and, you know, hold it against them. By the end of the day, they are in direct contravention of that CBA. The mere fact that the Milwaukee Bucks took that decision to not only boycott, and then the rest of the teams went in unison, were strong, you know, showing unison. First, it was historic, because we've never seen anything like that across all of pro sports. And then it filtered down. We saw slowly NFL teams decided not to practice. We saw individual games within Major League Baseball were also boycotted. As you said, the WNBA, who has always been out front in matters of social injustice, they boycotted games on back-to-back days. You even saw Naomi Osaka in tennis. She's playing the U.S. Open as we speak. She decided not to play her Western and Southern Open semifinal, or at least she threatened not to, and then eventually did. So I want to say that I am very proud for the courageous turn that the players took. However, Marsha and Neil, I do not know if it is enough. And again, it is not a criticism of the players. We've seen this over 400 years now. We walk, we're told this is not the time, this is not the place, and that is not enough. We march, this is not the way, this is not the place, then we realize it's not enough. We even protest, we read, and then we're told, no, it's not the way, this is not the place, and then it's not enough. We kneel, and that's not the way, that's not the place, and then we realize this is not enough. And as you all know, I was a very strong proponent of us playing these games in the bubble, because, as we agreed, the platform was so huge. So then every interview we get to say, we'd be able to call the names of fallen who have not gotten any measure of justice. Then you saw the social messages across the social justice messages across the back of the jerseys. So I honestly thought that playing was the way to go. It is not. And I do not want to say that the players should not play, but I think that that is the only way that they are going to get through, because I've come to realize this is no longer a fight on doing what is right. This is no longer sending messages. The only way this fight is going to be won is in the economic battlefield. You and I personally talk about this, Marsha. the reason that slavery finished for the British was not because of the riots or the abolitionists in Parliament putting in power. What did we say, Marsha? It no longer became economically viable for the British to continue slavery. And I think that is the only way right now that this war is going to be won on our side. And by that I say, it is unfortunate, let me also say, that a lot of pressure is being put on NBA players and eventually NFL players, because I think we're asking too much of them as young 20-something-year-old men, for the most part, to take on this fight on their shoulders. At the same time, and again, I'm not criticizing anyone because I really am proud of what they did. They are the only group of black men, and they being the NBA and NFL combined, who have any real economic leverage in this war. You know how much money is invested or how much money the US depends on professional sports. Their only leverage they have right now is to withhold their labor. It's the only one. And anyone who questions what withholding their labor can possibly do, you have to look no further than the 2017 All-Star game that was designated for Charlotte. As we know, Charlotte had some laws that, did not look out for transgender and gay people, protecting them from using certain facilities, bathroom, etc., etc. And because of those punitive laws, the NBA threatened, or at least it even threatened, they had decided at that point that they will take the All-Star game away from Charlotte. Within, I want to say, in a matter of weeks or months, those laws were then repealed. So it shows you how much power these leagues have because of the amount of money that they bring into their respective cities. Right now it will not look like a lot because they are in one city. They are in Florida or Orlando, Florida, so they are not in their respective cities. But going forward for next year, if indeed we either find a vaccine or we just find a way to return basketball and NFL to their respective cities, these players can put the pressure, because already we've seen or we've heard reports where the Bucks were on a phone call with the Wisconsin Attorney General. That does not happen unless they understand the amount of economic power that the NBA carries and the money that is circulated within the state of Wisconsin due to the Milwaukee Bucks, then obviously the Milwaukee Brewers, and then even greater Green Bay Packers, who released a message right after the situation has happened. I believe a situation has come, and I'm not telling the players that they should not play, because it's easy for me sitting down here who does not have an economic stake in playing basketball. But I do believe the only way that this happens, the only way we really get what we are looking for, is to force change ourselves. We can't wait on a call for anyone else to do anything for us. We have to take the next step, and that is to withhold our labor.
Some very interesting points there. And of course, we'll be watching this one closely, because we could easily have a situation where now this type of protest and this type of boycott now becomes the norm in U.S. professional sports for players to continually get their message across. So we will be definitely monitoring the situation and seeing how this one plays out. But the games did indeed resume across the leagues. The NBA is getting really down deep into that business end of the playoffs as we head toward the respective titles. So in our remaining time, I'd like to touch on two particular series that are underway. So let's start with the Jazz and Nuggets, first of all. Now, that series is currently tied at 3 games apiece. We are set for a game 7 with the conference semifinal place up for grabs. I want to remind Justin Marvel and Neil Hoyt, their prediction for this series was,
which is already
4-1.
It's already 3 window. We are both 4-1.
Your prediction was 4-1 to the Utah Jazz. We're now at Denver Nuggets?
Yes.
Okay,
both of us were 4-1 Denver Nuggets. We haven't forgotten.
Sorry. Yes. 4-1 to the Denver Nuggets. So now that we're at 3-3 heading towards that all-deciding game 7, what really has made the difference, guys? Justin, start.
Donovan Mitchell. I know Donovan Mitchell is a good player. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's a first-time All-Star this year for no reason at all. averaging about, I think, 24 points a game during the regular season. But then St. Louis, he's had 2 50-point explosions in this one series alone. Something that was
50
not done.
points, and even 50 in the last game.
Right, and something that wasn't done, up until I think the last person who done it was Allen Iverson in 2001, that Eastern Conference semifinal series against Toronto, and then only that would have been Michael Jordan, I think, 1988 against the Cleveland Cavaliers. As I can say, like Donovan Mitchell's explosion. This is a guy who is about a league average, just about, like, I think he shoots 35% from behind the arc. And now I think he's shooting some ridiculous, like 55%. Like, Neil and I both said that we do not know where the offensive explosion coming from Utah will be able to, keep up with Denver. But we're seeing it here. Mike Conley missed game one, has come back, and he has been awesome as well. I think he's averaging over 20 a game as well. And I think what has really happened here, Marsha, in my estimation, I don't know for Neil, we have seen what the bubble has done. Like, scoring has been up all across the league. And I think without the pressure of opposing and visiting crowds, and then obviously the lack of travel, like, you don't have to travel, and that's not taking a wear and tear. It is like me and Neil talked about it. It's like an AAU tournament. You just come out, you play basketball, and that's what a lot of these, especially the younger players, the experienced players, I guess, will have adjusted quickly, but the younger players are going to like this because there's no pressure of crowds, no travel. You're accustomed coming from AAU basketball straight into college in some environments that would have been friendly towards you. There's no pressure on them just to play basketball. So no, we've seen the situation, and make no mistake, we also know Denver cannot play defense, whether on the perimeter or in the paint. They just don't play any. So, like, Utah has been throwing up some crazy numbers, and I'll save what has been going on Denver for Neil's point. But yeah, I don't think anyone could have seen this coming, how good Utah has been offensively, because typically that's not who they are. But Donovan Mitchell, that's all they can really say.
And before I get to Neil, I just got my numbers mixed up there. Donovan Mitchell, he had 44 points for the Jazz in the last game. And Neil, Jamal Murray, he had a game high 50 for the Nuggets. Would you say, though, the Nuggets is a one?
Of course not. The Nuggets are not a one-man team. At least not on the offensive end. On the offensive end, I would say, they have some pretty talented players, right? They have Jamal Murray at the point that is very, he can get you some buckets. Jokic is a big that can get it inside or outside. He's a hell of a passer. And even if you get Michael Porter Jr., Michael Porter Jr. has really shown that he belongs on this level. Yes, he was injured earlier in his career, but he is stepping up, and he's really showing that he can play, and he can play when the lights are brightest. My concern, though, is you should be asking me if they're a one-man team on defense. And I can't even tell you who that one-man is. Their interior defense is terrible, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's still Justin putting up the defense. But seriously speaking, man, it's one of those things where Denver, I knew Denver didn't have good defense, right? I mean, I know their defense was not all world, but I was thinking that at least they can be serviceable for a deep playoff run. Now, Justin and I, none of us have them to make it to the Western Conference Finals. However, we were still thinking that their defense would be good enough to get them into the next round of the playoffs. But my goodness gracious, anything going to the basket is null and void. I can score in that lane if I want to. And I am 40 years old with a bum knee. I am nowhere near their level of basketball skill. Right? That is how poor I think their defense is. Right? When you have Jokic, to me, he doesn't show any interest. No, I don't know if I actually feel that's an insecurity of his. Like, defense is just something he's not comfortable playing. He doesn't look comfortable on defense. He doesn't look comfortable on switches. He doesn't look comfortable when he has to step up and stop someone from going to the lane. I mean, it is terrible. Yes, you have Grant, Jeremy Grant. He's an okay defender and things like that. But I mean, Michael Porter Jr. can't guard anyone. It looks like
no, he can't.
Jamal Murray looked like a save out there for as many points as he could give you. He could probably just give you as many. I mean, Plumlee is a lot of energy and effort off of the bench, but to me, They literally have Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell all world.
Oh, yeah.
So right now, I know what you're talking about. I'm saying when you have Rudy Gobert looking like the next coming of Shaquille O'Neal, and I think that, you know, if Denver wants to improve, and as Justin and I said, they're not going to make the final. They're not going to make the Western Conference Finals. We have them actually to best make it to the next round. But if they want to improve going forward, they need to sharpen their defense. It's all right and all good and all fine to beat up teams in the regular season and become third and fourth and fifth in the Western Conference. But in the playoffs is defense. You have to play defense, especially team defense. My goodness, individual defense is poor, team defense is poor, interior defense is poor, perimeter defense is questionable at the very best. I mean, I can stop calling them the Denver Nuggets and call them the Denver Nuggets because there's no D in Denver. No D in Denver.
Because I was about to ask you, let's tell us how you really feel, Neil.
Nah, man, it's terrible. It's really terrible.
I'm going to put y'all quickly on the spot. One word answer. Who's going to win Game 7? Don't all jump at once.
Denver.
I agree, Denver.
Yeah, I got you.
Denver?
I gotta say Denver. I can't say
Denver. Well, there you have it. The guys believe that Denver will win that all-important Game 7, so we will see how that one goes. And quickly then, looking at the other series, the Eastern Conference semifinals are actually underway. We had Game 1 with the Boston Celtics and the Toronto Raptors.
Don't smile so wide, Marsha. Don't smile so wide. I am not
smiling any wider than I have been this entire program. The Celtics came away with a 112-94 victory. They had 6 players in double figures, Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum getting 21 apiece. On the other side, we have Kyle Lowry. He top scored for the Raptors with 17. Now, Neil, you said this series will belong to the Raptors. However, it is a fact that the Raptors are slow starters. Even on their title run, they virtually lost every single game one leading into this. So are you concerned at this stage, bearing in mind you have the Raptors to come out of?
Together. I am not concerned from the standpoint of, like, we knew all of this going into it, right? Justin talked about the Celtics matching up very well with Toronto, which I agreed with. And, you know, the Celtics, they have a really good team, good young nucleus. They can score. And their defense, you have players like Marcus Smart that can really mix it up. And other players, you have Theis, right? Sorry. But yeah, he's a really good player too. He's solid for what he can do, and he never plays outside of himself. And that's the beauty of the Boston Celtics. They're right. Everybody plays their role, and they do what they can on the parts that they're deficient on, and they've all bought into the defensive schemes, and they can all score the ball. Now, with Toronto, what I do know about Toronto is, as you mentioned, Marsha, they do start slowly, but they do adapt, right? And I mean, I know that when you have, to be fair and to be honest, when you have Kyle Lowry leading your scoring, you got a problem. Kyle Lowry is not that. And
Serge Ibaka, this highest scorer.
Exactly, got problems. So your best thing to do is to ensure that you get more scoring from your players, such as Fred VanVleet, Spicy P, Pascal Siakam. You have Marc Gasol, who you may not be looking for a lot of points, but you have to put some pressure on their bigs. You have OJ Anunoby. He's another player that can put pressure on their bigs. You have Norman Powell, who can light it up and also put some pressure on their perimeter defense. So I am not concerned at this moment. It was a bit of a shocker that they lost by so much, but you know, at the end of the day, I think Toronto is very good for making adjustments, and I believe they will do that to kind of even up the series in game 2.
So Neil expects the Raptors to level that one in game 2. Justin, your expectations for that game?
I think you will see a better showing from Toronto as much, and you know, I'm not the guy that says I told you so. I am the guy that says I told you so.
I was just about to say, because you messaged me yesterday saying I didn't want to say I told you so, but I told you.
I told you so, and y'all thought I was crazy during that live activation in Bubbles. But what did they do? The Boston Celtics match up well with the Toronto Raptors. Now, I do not expect Toronto to go 10-40 from behind the arc again. For me, I think Toronto will win. 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 I think Toronto will Do I expect them to shoot less than 39% from the field again? No, I do not. I think, as Neil correctly said to me, Nick Nurse is one of the best coaches in the league, easily like top 5. So adjustments will be made. But again, the reality is, right, when you look at the series, first thing first, if you're supposed to call the 4 best players in the series, I would say that arguably you could say Pascal Siakam is the best of everyone in the series. And the next 3 best players are Boston. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kemba Walker.
Kemba Walker.
And know that Kemba...
Keep by your sitting, Marshall, please.
Know that Kemba, I assume, is recovered from what... as I told Neil, the team just matches up well. It's like, again, if this were Milwaukee, where, like, you know, Milwaukee depends on a lot of inside scoring from Giannis, smaller part, Bledsoe and Brook Lopez, then I would tell you, no, Boston has no chance because, again, if you're starting Daniel Theis and a bunch of role players, Enes Kanter inside, like, you cannot stop anyone inside the paint. But the reality is, as I said before, Marc Gasol does not score in the paint anymore. Serge Ibaka is not a scorer in the paint. He takes a lot of outside jumpers. You can't exploit Boston's one weakness on defense. And it is not like their guards or perimeter players are small. Jason Tatum is very, very long. So too is Jaylen Brown. Marcus Smart is arguably the best wing defender in the entire league and is very, very strong, very stout. You just can't move him like that. And they let you get out in transition and shoot threes. This is a matchup problem for Toronto. And again, one thing I did not factor in, Toronto does indeed have veteran experience. Obviously, they've won the title last year. But again, as we've seen with this bubble is favoring young players because they don't have the worries of travel. They don't have you don't have a tough away crowd to deal with. And Boston's core is extremely young. At least their best players, when you look at the situation, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they are young, but they don't have to deal with the crowd. They don't even have to go home and deal with the heavy expectations of their home crowd. So this tailors everything to Boston, and I do not see how Toronto gets to 7 games against this Boston team that just matches up with them. So again, it will say Marcia and Neil, who thought it was drunk in bubbles and was not talking coherently, 4-2 the Boston Celtics.
So guys, there you have it. You know, 2 predictions to look out for. 1, Denver Nuggets will be the ones winning that series against the Jazz. And on opposing sides, we have Justin going for the Celtics in this Eastern Conference semifinals
which
series.
Which is the right side. Yeah, it's the right side, Justin, yeah.
And Neil sticking his guns with the Raptors. So we'll be watching these games.
That's the right side of being wrong.
We'll be watching these games very closely, and we will be sure to, I will be sure to let you know who was actually right and who was unfortunate. But that's it for tonight's show. This just in. You know, you can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, and of course, right here on YouTube. So in the event you're just joining us and you missed the top of the show, we had a very interesting interview with Randy Walker, the man who is dubbed the Roger Federer of sports media. So if you're a tennis fan, US Open fan, really you should go back, watch the replay, and get all of that information and knowledge from Randy. But that's it for us here on this Just In. I'm Marshall Boyce.
I am Justin Marvel.
And I am the Neil Hoyt.
Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, good night, everybody.
I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. The God's with the kingdom out of here just the same. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes? Shit.